We tell ourselves stories in order to live. This is the first sentence of Joan Didion's most famous essay, The White Album, which she wrote in 1979, and is arguably the most resonant and recognizable openings in contemporary American literature. We look for the sermon in the suicide, for the social or moral lesson in the murder of 5. We interpret what we see, select the most workable of the multiple choices. I'm not telling you to make the world better, because I don't think that progress is necessarily part of the package. I'm just telling you to live in it. Not just to endure it, not just to suffer it, not just to pass through it, but to live in it, to look at it, to try to get the picture, to live recklessly, to take chances, to make your own work and take pride in it, to seize the moment. And if you ask me why you should bother to do that, I could tell you that the graves are fine in private place, but none, I think, do their embrace. Nor do they sing there, or write, or argue, or see the tidal bore on the Amazon, or touch their children. And that's what there is to do, and get it while you can. And good luck at it. This is Joan Didion's commencement essay for the University of California, Riverside. Just before Christmas this past year, the iconic American writer Joan Didion passed away. She was 87 years old. Today, we'd like to celebrate her thought process and her life. She rose to fame for her journalism. She immersed herself totally in her stories. In her career, she covered a wide variety of topics: counterculture, war, immigration. She also wrote a handful of novels and a couple of memoirs. Didion's remarkable 5 decades-long career has earned her a prominent place in American literary canon. She deserves every bit of it. The 12 early pieces collected in Let Me Tell You What I Mean display her masterful prowess and underline her astonishing agility with thought and word alike. Her musings, they all have an indelible Didion signature. Call them Didionesque, if you please. A couple of weeks ago, New Yorker's Hilton Owls wrote of Didion. Her genius, and it was genius, lay in her ability to combine the specific and sweeping in a single paragraph, to understand that the details of why we hurt and alienate one another based on skin color, sex, class, fame, or politics are also what make us American, or Indian for that matter, I suppose. In 2017, a documentary about her came out. The film is called Joan Didion, The Center Will Not Hold. I saw it last week. It's streaming on Netflix at the moment. It's an intimate look at Didion's writing and personal life. It offers us a glimpse of the person behind the persona. A person committed to their craft, absolutely. For a person who lived a life beset with tragedy. Now in 2003, her husband and soulmate, Joan Didion, died of a heart attack. Not long after, she lost her daughter, Quintana. The documentary was directed by her nephew, Griffin Dunn. Griffin Dunn's also an actor. We might have seen him in My Girl, as well as the TV series, This Is Us. The film begins with Joan recounting her early childhood memories. My first notebook, she says, was a big 5 tablet given to me by my mother with a sensible suggestion that I stop whining and learn to amuse myself by writing down my thoughts. The first entry is an account of a woman who believes herself to be freezing to death in the Arctic night, only to find when she wakes she stumbled onto the Sahara Desert, where she will die of heat before lunch. I've no idea what turn of a 5-year-old's mind could have prompted so insistently ironic and exotic a story. But it does reveal a predilection for the extreme, which has dogged me into adult life, she says. People are formed by the landscape they grow up in. It formed everything I ever think, I ever do, or am. Sacramento, the last frontier. She remembers that once when they were snowbound, her mother gave her several old copies of Vogue and pointed out in one of them an announcement, a competition Vogue had then for college seniors. The Prix de Paris. First prize, a job in Paris or New York. Her mother was convinced she could win it. She did, in a final year at Berkeley. Berkeley was not her first choice. Now here, she writes about the disappointment she felt when she did not get accepted in the college of her choice. Let me find that for you. On being unchosen by the college of one's choice. She wanted to get into Stanford, just for the record. I remember quite clearly the afternoon I opened that letter. I stood reading and rereading it, my sweater and my books fallen on the hall floor, trying to interpret the words in a less final way. The phrases unable to take and favourable action, fading in and out of focus until the sentence made no sense at all. We lived then in a big dark Victorian house, and I had a sharp and dolorous image of myself growing old in it, never going to school, anywhere. The spinster in Washington Square. I went upstairs to my room, locked the door, and for a couple of hours I cried, and for a while I sat on the floor of my closet and buried my face in an old quilted robe, and later, after the situation's real humiliation, which is that all my friends who'd applied to Stanford had been admitted, had faded into safe theatrics, I sat on the edge of the bathtub and thought about swallowing the contents of an old bottle of codeine and emptying. Of course, I did not take the tablets. And she goes on to say, none of this matters very much at all. None of those early successes, early failures. I wonder if we'd better not find some way to let our children know this. Finding one's role at 17 is a problem enough, without being handed somebody else's script. Wise words to live by. Well, after she got out of Berkeley, she got offered a job at Vogue, which she took up and moved to New York, thrilled at the prospect naturally. She loved it. When I first saw New York, I was 20. It was summertime and the warm air smelled of mildew, and some instinct programmed by all the movies I'd ever seen and all the songs I'd ever heard sung and all the stories I'd read about New York informed me that it would never be quite the same again. It never was. Her first piece was called Self-Respect, Its Source, Its Power. Not your usual regular Vogue sort of article, one suspects. She agreed. People with self-respect exhibit a certain toughness, a kind of moral nerve. They display what was once called character. Quality, although approved in abstract, sometimes loses ground to other more instantly negotiable virtues. Character, or the willingness to accept responsibility for one's own life, is a source from which self-respect springs. However long we postpone it, she writes, we eventually lie down alone in that notorious bed we make ourselves. Whether or not we sleep in it depends on whether or not we respect ourselves. Now, revisiting a conversation with Griffin in the documentary, we find Joan confessing, I've spent my entire adult life, it seems to me, in a state of profound culture shock. I wish I were unique in this, but I'm not. You may not be afflicted with my misapprehensions, and I may not be afflicted with yours, but none of this starts tabula rasa. We all distort what we see. We have to struggle to see what's really going on. A couple of fun facts we discovered after watching the documentary. Warren Beatty, quite the ladies' man, was obviously quite keen on her, and he asked to hang out with her at some point, to which she said, I don't think that's feasible. Whenever she got stuck or got writer's block, she would literally freeze her words. She would throw the papers in a plastic bag and put it in the freezer till the words came back to her. And another one, which is quite unbelievable. Han Solo, that's right, Harrison Ford, was once her carpenter. He built huge bookcases for her California home. Her husband, the writer John Gregory Dunn, and her daughter Quintana's passing shaped the year of magical thinking. I've noted down a few excerpts from that as well. And this is how it goes. Life changes fast. Life changes in an instant. You sit down to dinner and life as you know it ends. Grief turns out to be a place none of us know until we reach it. We anticipate, we know that someone close to us could die, but we do not look beyond the few days or weeks that immediately follow such an imagined death. We misconstrue the nature of even those few days. We might expect, if the death is sudden, to feel shock. We do not expect the shock to be dislocating to both body and mind. We might expect that we will be inconsolable, crazy with loss. We do not expect to be literally crazy, cool customers who believe their husband is about to return and need his shoes. In the version of grief we imagine, the model will be healing. A certain forward movement will prevail. The worst days will be the earliest days. We imagine that the moment to most severely test us will be the funeral, after which this hypothetical healing will take place. When we anticipate the funeral, we wonder about failing to get through it, rise to the occasion, exhibit the strength that invariably gets mentioned as a correct response to death. We anticipate needing to steel ourselves for the moment. Will I be able to greet the people? Will I be able to leave the scene? Will I be able to even get dressed that day? We have no way of knowing that this will not be the issue. We have no way of knowing that the funeral itself will be a kind of narcotic regression in which we are wrapped in the care of others and the gravity and the meaning of the occasion. Nor can we know ahead of that. And here lies the heart of the difference between the grief as we imagine it and grief as it is. The unending absence that follows, the void, the very opposite of meaning, the relentless succession of moments during which we will confront the experience of meaninglessness itself. We are imperfect mortal beings, aware that mortality, even as we push it away, failed by our very complications so wired that when we mourn our losses, we also mourn, for better or for worse, ourselves, or as we were, as we are no longer, as we will one day not be at all. People who've recently lost someone have a certain look, recognizable, maybe only to those who've seen that look on their own faces. I've noticed it on my face, and I notice it now on others, she writes. The look is one of extreme vulnerability, nakedness, openness. These people who've lost someone look naked because they think themselves invisible. I myself felt invisible for a period of time. I could not count the times during the average day when something would come up that I needed to tell him. This impulse did not end with his death. What ended was the possibility of response. I know why we try to keep our dead alive. We try to keep them alive in order to keep them with us. I also know that if we are to live ourselves, there comes a point at which we must relinquish the dead. Let them go. Keep them dead. Not only is that magical thinking, it's magical writing. In the essay Why I Write, Didion describes a particular shimmer that forms around images in her mind. Now we understand what Joan means when she says, I write entirely to find out what I'm thinking, what I'm looking at, what I see and what it means, what I want, what I fear. The work of understanding why. As part of the new journalism, Didion was known for her first-person writing. Subjective perception was always at the heart of her impulses as a reporter and as an essayist. Something about a situation will bother me, so I'll write a piece to find out what it is that bothers me, she once explained in an interview with Hilston House. Her target was what she called sentimentality, the prefabricated storylines of fairy tales that spread within the culture and that caused a society to rip apart. Didion's work will hopefully last because it was a product of a restless mind. In retrospect, we know how to write when we begin, she once said. What we learn from doing it is what writing was for. Her work was her own answer to the question of what writing and living are for. It ought to be ours too, to keep evolving. As Joan Didion would say, I've already lost touch with a couple of people I used to be.